Her hand rested on the line that read, "Owner, Pauline L. Grant," and she whispered, "If you've tried to erase my name, my son, then I'll make sure you have to read it again." Her eyes glimmered, a strange, fierce light born of betrayal and resolve. She opened a drawer and took out Harold's old journal, worn and brittle with age. On the last page, his handwriting read, "If you cannot hold on to something with your hands, then hold on to it with the truth." Pauline pressed her lips together. She understood now. It was time for the truth to come to light. Zuide labanjik sangting ang, chun mi. The rain fell in a steady drizzle all evening. Wind lashed against the old window frames, the gusts and the rain whispering like the restless voices of the house's wandering souls. Pauline sat at the dining table, a stack of documents neatly tucked in a plastic folder before her. A warm lamp cast a wavering light over her face, caught between fear and resolve. The clock struck 9. A car stopped at the gate. Benjamin stepped into the house, his raincoat slung over his shoulder, his expression cold. "You called me in a hurry," he said, impatience in his voice. "What could be so important that I had to leave a meeting?" Pauline looked at him, silent for a moment. Her eyes were no longer wet, only weary and deeply sad. She pushed the folder toward him, and her voice hoarse asked, "I want you to explain what these are." Benjamin frowned and glanced down. For a fleeting instant, he froze. The bank statement, the mortgage file, his own signature, laid out plainly, irrefutable. "Where did you get these?" he asked, his tone brittle. "It's not important," Pauline replied. "What matters is that you look at me and tell the truth. You used this house as collateral, didn't you?" Benjamin was silent. "Answer me, Benjamin." Her voice rose, not trembling anymore, but ringing, full of pain. "You signed my name, didn't you?" Benjamin shut his eyes. For a moment he thought he could lie, as he had before, but the look in his mother's eyes, steady, seeing through him, made that impossible. I had no other choice," he said. Pauline let out a dry, shattered laugh. "No other choice? Or have you simply chosen not to choose me a long time ago?" Benjamin drew a sharp breath, trying to steady his voice. "I only wanted to save the company. Mia, she—" "Don't you dare say her name!" Pauline shouted, springing to her feet. "I know she's behind this. She made you sign, made you turn our home into collateral, made you deceive your own mother." She slammed her hand on the table, her voice breaking. "Don't you understand, Benjamin? This house is my soul. I spent my whole life keeping it, and you treat it like a number on a contract." Benjamin took a step back, his gaze wavering. "You don't understand. You don't know the pressure I'm under. I had to do what?" She cut him off, voice glacial. "Betray me to get ahead? Use my name to prove yourself to another woman?" He fell silent. The rain hammered on the tin roof like frantic drums. Pauline looked at him, eyes full of tears, but her voice was eerily calm. "You know, Benjamin, what hurts me most isn't that you deceived me. It's that you no longer feel ashamed to do it." Benjamin clenched his fists and stepped back. "Don't turn me into a monster. I'm only trying to save us," he pleaded. Pauline managed a small, hoarse smile. "No, my son. You aren't saving anyone. You're burying me, burying the last of your humanity." A bolt of lightning split the sky, illuminating both their faces. Two people on opposite sides of a battlefield, both carrying the Grant name, but with hearts that no longer beat in the same rhythm. Pauline gripped the folder to her chest, as if holding the last piece of her soul. "If you want this house," she said quietly, each word slicing the air like a blade, "you'll have to take it from me in court." Her voice was steady and resolute. "I am not afraid anymore, Benjamin. Not anymore." Benjamin fell silent. In that instant, he realized the fragile, submissive mother he had known was gone, replaced by a woman ready to fight. even if it meant fighting her own son. Benjamin froze at his mother's words. Outside, the rain still fell hard, their shadows cast on the wall, two figures bound by blood, or something like it. One frail and aged, the other young, proud, and trembling. For a long time, neither spoke. Benjamin drew in a sharp breath, his voice taut with disbelief. "So that's it then? You really want to drag your own son into court? You want to humiliate me?" Pauline looked at him, really looked, and for a fleeting moment she saw the little boy he once was hiding beneath the man he had become. Her voice softened, heavy with sorrow. "I don't want to destroy you, Benjamin. I just want you to stop, before it's too late." Benjamin gave a bitter laugh. "Too late? You talk like you already know the future." "I do," she said quietly, "because I've lost everything once before." The words made him falter. Pauline stepped closer, her trembling hand resting on the folder between them. "Have you ever wondered why your father never seemed entirely like you?" Benjamin frowned, confused. "What are you talking about?" "The truth," Pauline said, her eyes glistening, ready to break. "The truth I've kept for 30 years. The room fell utterly still. Even the rain outside seemed to pause, leaving only the pounding of Pauline's heart in her chest. She took a deep breath, then spoke each word cutting through the silence like a blade. "You're not my biological son." Benjamin staggered back, his face draining of color. "What did you say?" "I knew you wouldn't believe me," Pauline whispered. "But it's true, Benjamin. When you were 2 years old, there was a fire in the boarding house near your father's workshop. When the firefighters arrived, they found one survivor, a baby boy. That boy was you." Benjamin stared at her, unable to speak. Pauline went on, voice trembling but unbroken. "Your father wanted to report it, to turn you over to the authorities. But I couldn't. You were so small, so fragile, and when I held you, I knew I couldn't let you go. I told them you were ours. I changed the papers, the birth record, everything." She sank into a chair, tears spilling freely. "I never wanted you to find out. I was afraid you'd feel like you didn't belong. I loved you, Benjamin, more than anything. Maybe too much. Maybe that's why I held on so tightly." Benjamin took another step back. The air thickened between them. He looked at her, the woman he had trusted his whole life, and saw now only a stranger confessing an unforgivable sin. "So," he whispered, his voice cracking, "my entire life has been one of your lies?" "No, Benjamin, it wasn't a lie. What?" he shouted, eyes blazing. "You stole the truth from me. You stole my identity. You stole my right to know who I am." Pauline sobbed, reaching out with trembling hands. "I'm sorry. I just wanted to keep you. You were everything to me." But Benjamin recoiled, stepping back as if her touch burned him. His voice dropped, low and merciless. "Then you're right, Mother. You have nothing left to lose, because I was never really yours." The words struck like a knife through the air. Pauline stood frozen, her hands falling limp at her sides as tears mingled with the returning sound of rain. Outside, lightning cracked across the sky, flashing through the window, illuminating her face, the face of a woman who had just lost everything, her son, her love, and the last reason she had left to keep living. The air inside the house stopped breathing. Pauline stood there, clutching her chest, tears mingling with the rain outside. Benjamin's eyes, once a soft brown she had always loved, were now nothing but two dark, bottomless pits filled with fury and despair. He laughed harsh, broken, the sound of a man who no longer knew who he was. "Perfect, Mom. 30 years of lies. And you choose tonight, the one night I came here, to say I'm sorry to drive a knife straight through my heart?" Pauline trembled, stepping forward, her voice cracking. Don't say that, Benjamin, please. I didn't— Didn't what? He roared, slamming his hand on the table. You hid the truth from me my entire life. You decided who I was, you gave me a name, built me, programmed me with this so-called love that was nothing more than pity. The words struck her like blows. The warmth she once saw in his eyes had turned into blades. Benjamin stepped closer, pointing at her chest, his voice erupting. Do you even know what it feels like to live inside a lie? To realize every decision, every dream you've ever had was controlled by someone who isn't even your real mother. Do you understand that, Pauline? It was the first time he had ever called her by her name. Not Mom, just Pauline bare, cold, final. The last thread between them snapped with that word. Pauline stumbled back, gripping the edge of the table to stay upright. Her voice trembled, heavy with grief. I never meant to hurt you. I just wanted you to have a home, to be loved, to have a family. You were a gift, Benjamin, a miracle. You saved me. Benjamin gave a short, bitter laugh. Saved you? No, you just needed someone to replace what you lost. You lost your husband, your life, your purpose, and you used me to fill that void. You made me your cure. Each word landed like a hammer, shattering what was left of her heart. She wanted to protest, to scream that her love had been real, but her throat closed tight, strangled by the truth. Only tears fell, burning her cheeks. Benjamin went on, his voice breaking under rage and pain. All my life, I just wanted to be free, but you chained me with guilt for wanting to live for myself. And now you say I betrayed you? No, Pauline. I'm just returning what you gave me. Pauline shook, reaching for his arm. Don't say that. You're my son. No matter where you came from, no matter who you are, you're still— Benjamin shoved her hand away. Enough. You don't have the right to call me your son. Don't ever say you love me again. She collapsed into a chair, her body trembling. Outside, the rain grew heavier, drowning out her sobs. Benjamin stood there for a moment, his face empty, then turned toward the door. Thanks for the truth, Pauline. But from now on, we have nothing left to say. He walked out. Pauline tried to call after him, but her voice was only a weak breath swallowed by the storm. Benjamin, please, don't go. The door slammed shut. A flash of lightning split the night, illuminating her crumpled body on the floor, her hands clutching the fallen transfer papers. In the flickering light, the old lamp swayed, casting a trembling glow over her, the image of a mother left utterly alone, whispering into the dark with what little strength she had left. I only wanted to keep you, not lose you like this. That night, the rain fell endlessly. Pauline sat at the table, staring into the empty space where Benjamin had stood before walking out. The small lamp flickered, its weak light glinting off the tears that slid down her wrinkled face. The ticking of the clock grew louder, heavier, counting down the final seconds of something dying inside the house, a mother's love. She didn't know how long she'd been sitting there. When the rain finally stopped, a pale dawn crept through the window, touching the transfer papers on the floor. They were damp and crumpled, Benjamin's signature still clear firm, decisive like a wound that refused to close. Pauline bent down to pick them up, her hand trembling, her vision blurred. Then came a knock at the door. It was Esther. The neighbor stepped inside, freezing at the sight of her friend. My God, Pauline, you've been sitting here all night? Pauline nodded weakly. He knows now, Esther. He knows everything. Esther sat beside her, taking her hand. You did the right thing. You couldn't keep it hidden forever. But now you have to take care of yourself. Pauline shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. I've already lost him, Esther. I can feel it. He's not my son anymore. She gave a faint smile, the kind that comes only from pain too deep to cry over. Esther glanced around the house, her voice soft. You have to stay strong. If not for him, then for yourself." Pauline said nothing. Inside her, one part wanted to believe her friend, the other knew some breaks could never be mended. In the days that followed, the house grew unbearably quiet. No laughter, no footsteps, no voice calling Mom from the hallway. Pauline still woke early, brewed her tea, made breakfast for two, then sat across from the empty chair, staring at it until her heart twisted in pain. Sometimes she stepped outside and gazed at the road that led to town, the same road Benjamin had taken that stormy night. She wondered where he was. Was he eating? Sleeping? Did he ever think about this house? But the only reply was the cold wind brushing past the fence. One afternoon, the mailman brought an envelope. Benjamin's handwriting. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a single check, no note, no words. Pauline stared at it for a long moment, then smiled through her tears. "He still remembers me, but he doesn't call me mother anymore." That night, she opened her journal and wrote, "You were right, Benjamin. I held on too tightly. But if you knew how afraid I was, afraid of the day you'd leave, would you forgive me?" Her hand trembled so badly that the words came out crooked, blurred by tears. She stopped writing and looked out the window. The night was moonless, clouds drifting slowly across the sky, as if trying to hide a sorrow too vast to name. Pauline whispered, her voice breaking apart, "If your father were still alive, he wouldn't forgive me either." She closed her eyes, sinking into the old wooden chair, her heart hollow. The house was so still, she could hear the ticking clock, counting each fragile beat left inside her chest. In the corner, a photograph of Pauline and a young Benjamin still rested neatly on the shelf. The faint light from the lamp fell across their faces, a smiling mother, a small boy clutching her hand, looking up at her with boundless trust. And between those two faces, the shadow of an invisible crack, a fracture that no love, no time, could ever mend again. That winter came earlier than anyone expected. Cold December winds howled through the cracks in the old window frames, sneaking into every corner of the house and filling it with a hollow chill. Pauline still lived alone. Every morning, she sat by the window knitting scarves, though she no longer knew who they were for. She hadn't heard from Benjamin in nearly 3 months. Then one evening, while she was making tea, came a soft knock at the door. At first, she thought it was Esther, but when she opened it, the figure standing on the porch made her heart stop. Benjamin. He stood there, hair disheveled, face gaunt, a shadow of stubble across his jaw, eyes sunken and tired. Gone was the sharp suit, the proud air. What remained was a man broken, lost. For a moment, Pauline didn't know whether to feel relief or fear. She could only whisper, voice trembling, "Benjamin, you came home?" He didn't answer, only nodded and stepped inside. The air between them was thick, heavy with all that had been said and all that hadn't. Pauline poured tea, sliding a cup toward him. He stared at the rising steam for a long moment before finally speaking, his voice quiet. "I'm sorry, Mom." 2 words. "I'm sorry" cut open every wound she had tried to let heal. Pauline swallowed back a sob and asked softly, How have you been living, Benjamin?" He gave a bitter smile. "I haven't been living, Mom. I've just been existing." He looked up, his eyes red. "Everything's gone. Mia's company is under investigation. That project, it was all a scam. She disappeared, took every cent, and left me with debts I can't even begin to pay." Pauline went still. "She left you?" Benjamin nodded, laughing faintly, the sound hollow. "She never loved me. I was just a name, a tool to make her business look legitimate. Everything, even the house, was part of her plan." Pauline stared at him, her chest tightening with a pain that was part grief, part pity, and part dread. All her old fears, every warning her heart had whispered, were true, and the cruelest part was hearing them confirmed by her own son. "Have you seen her since?" she asked quietly. Benjamin shook his head. "No trace. The police think she's out of the state." "But that's not the worst part, Mom." He clenched his hands, his voice trembling. "The worst part is realizing you were right. I betrayed the only person who ever truly loved me, for someone who never saw me as anything at all." Pauline bowed her head. A tear slipped down her cheek, landing hot on her trembling hand. "You don't know, Benjamin. I prayed every single day for you to come home, not to apologize, just to be safe." Benjamin looked at her, lips quivering, but words wouldn't come. They sat in silence for a long, fragile moment. Outside, snow began to fall. White flakes clung to the window pane, melting slowly. Inside, the fire crackled softly, throwing flickers of orange light across Benjamin's worn face, a face that was still her son's, though scarred now by time, deceit, and regret. He spoke again, voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, I don't know if I even deserve forgiveness." Pauline reached out, took his hand in both of hers, frail, shaking, but steady in its warmth. "You don't have to deserve it, Benjamin. You just have to still be my son." Benjamin bowed his head. Tears fell onto her hand, warm against her cold skin. Neither of them spoke after that. Outside, the wind moaned like the sigh of the old house itself, and the fire kept crackling softly, like the faint, stubborn heartbeat of something fragile trying to live again in the middle of winter. After that night Benjamin returned, the house seemed to breathe again just a little. Pauline cooked more often, lit extra candles in the evenings, as if trying to hold on to a flicker of warmth in a darkness that waited just beyond the walls. Benjamin barely spoke. Most of his hours were spent sitting before the fireplace, eyes vacant, staring into the flames as if the truth might be hiding somewhere in their shifting light. One afternoon, when snow had buried the path outside, a letter arrived with no return address. Benjamin opened it. Inside was a single envelope containing a copy of an adoption record, a faded photograph of Pauline holding him as a child, and, in the corner of the photo, a line scrawled in familiar handwriting, "You never truly belonged to her." Signed, Mia. Benjamin froze. The letter that came with it was brief, written in a voice as cold and cutting as ice. "You once asked how I could make your mother bend to my will, didn't you? I knew your secret, Benjamin. I knew you weren't her real son long before you did. I only did what she once did, use trust as a weapon." Each word sank into him like a blade. He read it again and again, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. Mia knew. She had known everything: his adoption, his lifelong insecurity, the quiet sense of not belonging, and she had exploited that very wound to bind him to her. He staggered, trembling, gripping the paper so tightly it tore. Memories flashed like a film burning backward. Mia's voice. "I understand you better than anyone, Benjamin. I know what it's like to be betrayed by your mother." Back then, he thought it was empathy. Now he saw it for what it was. A key, unlocking his resentment. He clenched his fists until blood beaded from his palms. God, she knew. It was all a trap. Pauline entered the room and stopped short at the sight of him, her son shaking, the crumpled envelope in his hand. "What is it, Benjamin?" He hid the papers behind his back, his voice hoarse. "Nothing. Just an old letter." But his eyes gave him away. Pauline stepped closer, gentle but firm. "You're lying to me again, aren't you?" Benjamin collapsed into a chair, his hand falling limp as he threw the letter onto the table. His voice cracked. "She knew, Mom. She knew from the beginning." Pauline picked it up, scanning the words. Her face went pale. "Oh, dear God." Benjamin buried his head in his hands. I destroyed everything, Mom. I let her control me, made me hate you, made me ruin the only thing I ever had left. Pauline moved to him, resting a hand on his shoulder. No, Benjamin. She deceived you. He looked up, eyes wet and hollow. No, you don't understand. I chose to believe her. I chose to betray you. That's on me, not her. The admission cut like a blade, each word a self-inflicted wound. He began pacing, breath ragged. You know what? She was right. I don't belong to you. I never did. I'm just someone you pitied. No! Pauline cried, almost shouting. You are not someone I pitied, Benjamin. You are my son. I gave birth to you through pain, through loss, through my very soul. But Benjamin shook his head, tears streaming down his face. I don't even know who I am anymore, Mom. I don't know what's real and what's been a lie. He sank to the floor, clutching his head, whispering as if to ghosts. If she knew the truth from the beginning, does that mean every bit of love from her, from you, was a lie too? Pauline knelt beside him, wrapping her arms around him, even as he trembled and fought against her hold. Her voice was soft, trembling but steady. No, my son. Lies can destroy, but love doesn't die that way. Real love survives even when you stop believing in it. They stayed like that, holding on to each other in the middle of the dim, snow-covered house. Outside, the wind howled across the whitened fields, and inside, the fire burned low, its faint, stubborn light reflecting in Benjamin's eyes. But within that light, something else began to burn, no longer hatred, but a haunting need. A need to uncover the truth once and for all, no matter the cost. 3 days later, before dawn had even touched the sky, Benjamin left. Pauline stood in the doorway, clutching the half-finished wool scarf in her trembling hands. She didn't speak, just watched her son drag his suitcase across the snow-blanketed path. The porch light threw a dim glow across his face, a face hardened, fractured, determined. Where are you going? She asked. Benjamin didn't turn around. To find her. I need to know. How she knew the truth. Pauline said nothing. She wanted to stop him, to beg him to stay. But one look at his eyes, red, cold, unshakable, told her she couldn't. The door slammed. The car started and disappeared down the empty, snow-white street, leaving behind an old woman gripping a scarf she would never finish. A few days later, Benjamin reached a small town on the outskirts of the state, the last registered address of Mia's company. The office was empty. The door padlocked, the sign faded beneath frost. He asked around, but everyone just shook their heads. She's gone, they said. Vanished, like she never existed. As he turned to leave, an elderly woman called out from her porch. Are you looking for Mia? I remember her. She came here a few times with another woman. I think her name was Pauline. Benjamin froze. Did you say Pauline? Yes, about a year ago. They talked for a long time in the cafe by the lake. I remember because they didn't look like strangers. More like people with unfinished business. His heart pounded. Pauline and Mia, together, a year ago? Why hadn't his mother ever mentioned it? He ran to the lake, the wind whipping across the frozen surface. Images flashed through his mind, his mother and Mia sitting face to face, voices low, eyes knowing. He ran back to the car, grabbed his phone, scrolled through old emails, and then there it was, a name he hadn't noticed before. M. Carson, sender of an email from 6 months ago titled Investment Proposal. He opened the attachment. On the last page, under the list of early shareholders, one name glared up at him. Pauline L. Grant, initial investor. He stared at it, stunned, then whispered, disbelieving, No. She knew? He dropped the phone onto the seat, hands shaking. If she met Mia first, if she invested in Mia's company, Then what was the truth? Who had betrayed whom? The question echoed like thunder. He drove through the night, snow hammering against the windshield, the wind howling as if it wanted to tear the world apart. In his head, one question pulsed over and over. Who betrayed whom first? When Benjamin returned, dawn was breaking. Pauline was sitting at the kitchen table, still in her nightgown, pale and sleepless. He walked in, dropped his phone on the table, the screen still showing the email with her name. "Explain this," he said, voice hoarse, trembling. "You met her first, didn't you? You knew her all along." Pauline looked at the screen, then at her son. Her lips moved, but no words came out. A cold draft slipped through the cracked window, making the candle on the table flicker. Finally she whispered, her eyes glistening, "I don't want to lie anymore." "Yes, I met her." Benjamin's voice rose. "Why?" Pauline clasped her hands tightly, her voice breaking. "Because she was connected to your father." Benjamin went still. The air froze. "My father?" he managed to whisper. Pauline nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Years ago, before the fire, Harold had a child with another woman. The baby went missing, and Mia was that child's sister." Benjamin staggered backward, eyes wide. The truth hit him like lightning in a blizzard. Mia had known everything from the start, who he was, what his father had done, and she had approached him not out of love, but vengeance. Pauline's voice trembled through her sobs. "I didn't realize until I met her. When I found out, I begged her to stop. But she just laughed and said, 'I'll make your son do to you what his father did to my mother.'" Benjamin backed into the wall, clutching his head. The world tilted, the room spinning around him. Tears burst from his eyes, part anguish, part horror, part unbearable guilt. My God, I was her weapon. I became the punishment for someone else's pain. I repeated my father's sin with my own hands. Pauline fell to the floor, wrapping her arms around him. Both of them wept together, broken, the sound of their grief mixing with the wind that howled outside. And somewhere within that storm, their cries rose and fell, the echo of a tragedy reaching its final, merciless crescendo. Benjamin drove through the night without stopping. Snow fell thick and fast, the wind lashing against the windshield, but he didn't care. In his mind, only one voice echoed Mia's words from the letter. "I only did what she once did, used trust as a weapon." Now he finally understood. Mia hadn't wanted money. She hadn't wanted the house. She had wanted to recreate the same tragedy, to make Benjamin do to Pauline what Harold, his father, had once done to her mother. And he, blind and foolish, had walked right into her trap. When the car finally stopped, he found himself before a small wooden cabin by the frozen lake, the last address police records had tied to Mia. A faint glow flickered through the window. Benjamin stepped out. Snow swallowed his boots up to the ankles, the icy wind howling like a warning. The front door gave way easily when he pushed. Mia sat by the fireplace, still beautiful, too beautiful, but something in her eyes had changed. They were hollow now, deeper, like a place where nothing lived anymore. She smiled when she saw him. "I knew you'd come." Benjamin stood motionless, hands trembling. "Why?" he rasped. "Why did you have to do it?" Mia leaned back in the chair, her voice smooth as velvet, yet every word dripped with venom. "Because you're the blood of the man who ruined my mother, and I wanted him to pay through the son he never acknowledged." Benjamin flinched. He gave a broken laugh. "Then you made a mistake. I'm not his blood. I was found, not born. I'm just another victim, Mia." She tilted her head, something flickering in her gaze, but her tone stayed icy. "Maybe. But you were still perfect. You loved me. You betrayed her. You signed your name. You made her feel what my mother felt, the pain of being destroyed by the one she loved most. That's all I ever needed." Benjamin shook his head, tears cutting down his face, mingling with the melted snow on his cheeks. "No, not enough. Because you didn't just destroy her, you destroyed me. You made me hate the only person who ever truly loved me." He took a step closer, voice cracking. "When I saw my mother on her knees, crying because of me, I realized revenge doesn't free anyone. It only turns us all into monsters." Mia said nothing. Her lips trembled, just slightly. She turned away, whispering, almost to herself, "You don't understand. That hatred was the only thing keeping me alive. Without it, there's nothing left of me." Benjamin reached out, gripping her shoulders, forcing her to face him. "Then look at me, Mia. Look at the man you called your enemy. I've lost my father, my mother, and myself. Is that not enough for you?" Mia stared at him, eyes glistening. Then suddenly, she laughed, a broken, hollow sound, part sob, part surrender. Maybe there's nothing left to hate anymore." She reached into her coat and pulled out a document, the original certificate of ownership for the company, and tossed it into the fire. Flames devoured it, flaring bright orange, paper curling, turning to ash. Mia watched it burn, her voice quiet, almost tender. "See, Benjamin? Now it's all ashes. No one wins." Benjamin stood still, tears streaming down his face as the firelight flickered across hers, beautiful, proud, and utterly broken. She smiled faintly, whispered one last time, "Go back to her, before it's too late." Then she turned, opened the door, and walked into the snow. Benjamin called after her, but her figure dissolved into the blizzard, fading until there was nothing left but white. The wind swallowed the sound of his voice. Inside, he sank to his knees before the dying fire, clutching the handful of ashes left from the burning paper, the final proof of a life consumed by vengeance. Outside, snow kept falling. Inside, Benjamin stayed still on the floor, his fingers tightening around the ash, the remains of everything that hatred had ever touched. When Benjamin returned, dawn was breaking. The winter sun glared against the blanket of snow, so bright it hurt his eyes. His hands were blistered from the fire at the cabin. Smoke still clung faintly to his clothes. He couldn't remember how long he'd been driving, only that his heart felt heavier than the frozen ground beneath his wheels. The road home was buried in ice. Each time the tires slipped, he saw flashes of Pauline's face, her tearful eyes, her frail hand holding his the night he'd left. "I don't need you to be perfect," she had said. "I just need you to still be my son." Her voice seemed to echo through the wind, and Benjamin pulled over, bent over the wheel, and wept like a child. When he opened the door, the house was dark. No scent of tea, no ticking clock, only silence, thick, unnatural silence, as if the house itself were holding its breath. "Mom?" he called softly. No answer. He stepped into the living room. On the table lay the unfinished wool scarf, the one Pauline had been knitting while waiting for him. Beside it, a folded note, written in her delicate, familiar handwriting. "Benjamin, if you are reading this, it means you've come home. I always believed you would. No matter what happened, you are still my son. Don't let hatred teach you how to live. It will only turn your heart to stone. I forgive you not because you deserve it, but because I can't do otherwise. As long as you breathe, my love for you remains." The paper trembled in his hand. Tears blurred the final line. "I love you, my son." He stumbled through the house, calling her name until his voice broke. At last he found Pauline in her bedroom. She lay on the bed, her face serene, as though she had simply fallen asleep. The blanket was pulled to her chest, her thin hands clasped around a worn Bible open to the verse. "And forgiveness shall set your soul free." Benjamin fell to his knees. "Mom, I'm home. Please, open your eyes." But the room remained silent. Morning light filtered through the curtains, bathing her face in a soft gold glow. Holy, still, eternal. Benjamin broke down, clutching her cold hands, his tears soaking the pillow. "I'm sorry. I was wrong. I was so wrong." His words dissolved into sobs. He bowed his head into her palms and cried until his throat burned raw. All the anger, the guilt, the bitter words gone. Only a lost son remained, mourning the mother who had loved him past forgiveness. Outside, snow fell heavier, covering the world in white. The wind brushed against the windows gentle, almost like a sigh, and Benjamin thought he could hear her breathing in it, faint and forgiving. He lifted his head, eyes falling on his father's photograph on the wall. In that moment, he understood. The real sin wasn't in the past, it was in silence. And the only way to atone was not to die with regret, but to live with truth. He whispered, voice trembling but resolute, "You forgave me, Mom, so I'll live in a way that won't betray that forgiveness." He placed the letter on Pauline's chest and pressed a trembling kiss to her forehead, the first in years. Then he sat beside her for hours as daylight slowly filled the room. The candle on the nightstand flickered, burned one last time, and went out. In the stillness that followed, Benjamin spoke quietly to himself, as if making a vow. "From now on, this house will no longer belong to hatred. It will be where you rest in peace and where I learn to love again." The morning light touched the photograph of mother and son. This time, Benjamin didn't look away. He raised his head, eyes red but steady, and within them, a faint spark glimmered. Fragile, real, like a seed of life stirring again beneath the thawing snow. Pauline's funeral took place on a cold, gray morning. A thin layer of snow covered the brittle grass around the cemetery, so white and still that even the air seemed to hold its breath. Only a few people attended: Esther, the old priest, and Benjamin, the only son standing motionless beside the coffin. He didn't cry. When the priest read the final prayers, the wind whipped at his black coat, but he didn't move. His eyes stayed fixed on the casket draped with white forget-me-nots, his mother's favorite flowers. Their scent carried every memory back to him, her hand brushing his hair, her voice calling his name at night, the soft clink of a spoon in her morning tea. Now, all of it lived only in echoes. When the coffin began to lower, Benjamin's chest seized. He tried to speak Mom, but his throat locked. The sound of dirt striking the lid thudded heavy and final, each dull impact sealing away another fragment of his soul. After the funeral, Esther drove him home. The house was exactly as before, only the silence had changed. It no longer felt peaceful. It pressed down like weight. Esther looked around and said softly, "You should go back to the city, Benjamin. Staying here will only make it worse." He shook his head. "No. This is where she lived, and where I have to learn how to endure." In the days that followed, Benjamin rarely stepped outside. He cleaned, rearranged, folded. He dusted the table, straightened the photos, folded her blankets. Each object he touched brought a memory sometimes gentle, sometimes unbearable. One afternoon, he opened Pauline's wardrobe. Inside were a few worn sweaters and a small stack of old journals, their covers frayed, pages faintly scented with lavender. He sat down and began to read. Her handwriting was steady, graceful, painfully sincere. "Benjamin is sick today. I begged God not to take him. I know I deceived him, but if I hadn't, I would have lost him forever. My son is growing up. He's drifting away from me, like a streetlight fading at the end of a winter road. I fear one day he'll walk away without looking back. Though, if I die one day, I hope he'll understand. I hid the truth not out of fear, but out of love. Love so deep it turned selfish. Benjamin closed the journal, his tears falling silently onto the cover. He whispered, voice breaking, "I understand now, Mom." "Too late, but I understand." That night, he went out to the garden. Snow had buried everything, only faint mounds marked where Pauline's flowers once bloomed. He knelt and placed a fresh bouquet of forget-me-nots into the snow. "I don't know if you can hear me," he said quietly, "but I'll live the way you wanted. No more hate, no more running." A soft wind stirred, carrying the faint scent of dried flowers. Benjamin looked up at the dim sky, and for a moment he could almost feel her there, watching from somewhere beyond the clouds. Back inside, he lit the fireplace and sat by the window. The firelight flickered across his face, smudged with soot, lined with loss, but in his eyes something had changed, a faint gleam, small, fragile, but steady. Before bed, he opened his own journal and wrote the first line in months. "Mother is at peace, but I am not. Maybe I never will be, not until I can do one thing, turn this house into a place where she smiles, not where she weeps." The pen stilled, and in that pause, Benjamin realized something profound. In the heart of grief, he had found direction, not to forget, but to live, and redeem every mistake, one quiet day at a time. Time moved slowly in the house where Pauline once lived. In the beginning, Benjamin still woke in the middle of the night, half certain he could hear her soft cough in the hallway or the whistle of boiling water from the kitchen, but he came to understand those weren't sounds at all, only memories lingering in the walls, in the breath of a home that had loved too long. One morning, the snow finally stopped. The sky cleared. Benjamin opened the windows wide for the first time in weeks. Sunlight spilled into the room, catching on the faint smoke stain where Pauline used to sit and read her prayers. He whispered, "Mom, I'm going to fix everything. Not to forget you, but so that you can finally smile." From that day, he began to remake the house little by little. He repainted the walls the same soft white Pauline had loved. He scrubbed the old window frames until the glass gleamed again, replacing the dried flowers with fresh lavender. Each time he placed a stem into a vase, he murmured, "This one's for you." Esther visited often, bringing warm bread and quiet encouragement. She looked around at the brightening rooms and smiled gently. "Pauline would be so proud of you, Benjamin." He smiled back, weary but sincere. "I don't know if she can see, but I'm doing all of this, so she can forgive me not just with words, but for real." Every evening he sat by the fireplace, reading through Pauline's journals again. Some passages he knew by heart, yet the tears still came. "I don't know if I've been a good mother, but I know that to love is never wrong." Benjamin pressed a hand to his chest and whispered, "You were right, Mom. You were never wrong. The one who was wrong was me." Late one afternoon, while cleaning the attic, he found a small wooden box under Pauline's bed. Inside were old family photos, a few unsent letters, and a picture of a 2-year-old boy the child pulled from the ashes long ago. On the back was a single line written in Pauline's careful hand. "The day I found you was the day I was saved." Benjamin sat there for a long time, the photo trembling in his hand. For the first time, he felt the full weight of her love, a love not born of blood, but of choice. Pauline had chosen him, chosen to love him, chosen to sacrifice everything to keep him. That love was greater than truth itself. Through his tears, Benjamin smiled. "You didn't rescue an orphan, Mom. You saved 2 souls, yours and mine." From that day, he began to write. Not letters begging for forgiveness, but pages of memories, a memoir of Pauline, the woman the world knew only as a gentle mother, but who, to him, was an entire universe of love and hurt. He wrote with his hands, his tears, his heart. Some people leave behind fortunes when they die. My mother left a house that taught me love isn't possession, it's the courage to let go. Each line he wrote seemed to lift a weight from him, as if every word carried one of Pauline's soft breaths back into the world. By the end of winter, the house was complete. Benjamin hung a framed photograph of Pauline in the living room. Beneath it, engraved in glass, were the words, "Pauline L. Grant, the woman who taught me how to forgive." He sat down in the chair across from the photo and closed his eyes. A gentle breeze drifted through the open window, and for a moment he could almost hear her laugh, light, tender, exactly as it had been in life. No anger, no sorrow. Only a son learning, at last, how to live kindly for the mother who had once loved him with everything she had. Spring returned. After long months of snow, Pauline's house was filled again with sunlight and the scent of blooming things. The lavender pots on the porch had come alive, soft violet blossoms swaying in the breeze, carrying a faint fragrance that felt like her breath lingering in the air. Benjamin stood by the window, gazing at the garden, a strange ache rising in his chest. Part peace, part pain. He had spent the entire winter repairing the house, but he knew now. Some things could not be repainted, rebuilt, or forgotten. Mistakes don't fade. They can only be faced. That afternoon, he sat down at the table, a sheet of paper before him. Beside it, his mother's old clock ticked steadily, heartbeat-like, faithful even in absence. He drew in a long breath and began to write, not to anyone else, but to himself, a letter to the man he once was. To the Benjamin of the past, if you're reading this, you're still angry. You still feel deceived, betrayed, stripped of your identity, but stop for a moment because you're wrong. Mother didn't lie to take something from you. She lied to keep alive a child who was already halfway gone. You called her selfish, and you were right. But sometimes, love is selfish because it's terrified of losing what it loves most. You thought you were the victim, but she was the one who carried the wound. She lived every day afraid of the truth, afraid of the moment you'd leave. And in the end, it happened anyway. You hurt her, and she forgave you. Her forgiveness wasn't because you deserved it, but because she never stopped loving you. So if you want redemption, start by forgiving yourself. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's learning to live without letting pain define you. She once wrote, "As long as you breathe, my love remains." So breathe, Benjamin. Live, truly live. Tell this story so no one else repeats your mistakes, and no one ever has to love in fear the way she did. He set down the pen. Tears fell onto the paper, smudging the ink, but this time he didn't wipe them away. He let them dry there, part of the letter itself, a quiet proof that he had wept, regretted, and forgiven. Folding the page carefully, Benjamin placed it inside Pauline's wooden box, beside her journals. Then he whispered, "If someone finds this box one day, tell them this isn't a story about betrayal. It's about how we learn to love again after losing everything." That evening, he stepped onto the porch. The sky was clear, stars bright, and the wind carried the lavender's gentle perfume through the yard. Benjamin lifted his face to the night, a faint smile softening his features. No more trembling, no more collapse, only peace, the kind he had never known. And in that stillness, he felt it, a presence around him, light as wind, warm as breath. A voice rose in his mind, tender, familiar, and achingly calm. "You've come home, Benjamin. Now I can rest." He closed his eyes and whispered back, "So can I, Mom." The candle flickered in the kitchen window, casting his shadow across the wall. For the first time in years, that shadow did not tremble. It stood tall and steady, as if, in that quiet house, an unseen hand was still holding him, guiding him gently toward the rest of his life. Summer came late that year. The first rays of sunlight fell across the old tiled roof, washing Pauline's little house in gold, as if awakening it from a long, quiet sleep. Benjamin stood on the porch, a worn suitcase in his hand. He had lived here almost a full year since his mother's passing, a year of stillness, of tears, of mornings when he brewed 2 cups of tea but drank only 1. A year of learning to live slowly enough to hear the sound of his own heart. Now everything inside the house was in order. Pauline's photo hung neatly on the wall, her wooden chair polished to a gentle shine, and the small bookshelf beneath the window held all her journals and the letter to the past. The house was no longer a prison. It had become sacred ground, a place where leaving no longer felt like abandonment. Esther came to see him off, carrying a basket of warm pies and a few ripe apples. Her voice was husky but kind as she asked, "You're sure about this, Benjamin? This house used to weigh on you." He nodded, smiling softly. "It doesn't anymore. It's a farewell now. Mom wouldn't want me to stay trapped in the past." Esther glanced around, her eyes glimmering with memory. "I'll stop by often to keep the flowers alive, tidy the garden. Pauline once told me this house wasn't just hers, but for anyone who needed a place to come home to." Benjamin's smile deepened. "Then it will be that. A home for the lost to find themselves again like I did." For a while neither spoke. Only the sound of birds high in the trees and the wind rustling softly through the open door. Benjamin's gaze swept over the room one last time. The clock his mother wound each morning, the chipped porcelain vase she never threw away. Every object seemed to hum with a quiet soul, and in each of them she still existed. He took a slow breath and gently closed the door. Before leaving, he rested his hand on the wooden frame and whispered, "Mom, I'll come back, but next time I'll bring a smile, not tears." The car rolled down the dirt road, past rows of green summer trees swaying in the wind. A sudden gust lifted a few lavender petals from the porch, sending them swirling after him, tiny, fragile violet wings spinning in the sunlight, like Pauline's invisible hands waving goodbye. Benjamin rolled down the window. The wind rushed in, full of warmth and life. Far ahead, the sun rose over the hills, bathing the road in light. For the first time in years, he felt alive, no longer running, no longer burdened by guilt. He remembered the final line in his mother's journal. "True love doesn't hold you back. It simply gives you a reason to return." Benjamin smiled. "I understand now, Mom. You held me with love, not chains." Sunlight poured through the windshield, lighting his face. His smile was quiet, but real, not radiant, yet full of life. The sky stretched endlessly blue, the road open and bright ahead. And in that moment, he could almost hear her voice again, soft as breath, from somewhere behind him. "Go, my son. I'm always here." Benjamin closed his eyes, and tears slipped free. But this time, they were tears of freedom. 10 years had passed. The little house on the hill still stood there quiet, gentle, surrounded by rows of lavender blooming in deep, soft purple. The summer wind drifted through, carrying that familiar sweetness Pauline had once loved, the scent that seemed to hold her presence still in every breeze, every petal, every beam of light slanting through the window. People had begun calling it by a new name, the House of Forgiveness. It was no longer a place shadowed by grief, but a refuge for souls in need of healing. Each year, a few would come, some mourning a loved one, some lost in life, some burdened by unspoken guilt. They would stay for a few days, write letters, plant flowers, and then leave lighter, calmer, more at peace. And it had all begun with Benjamin. He no longer lived there year-round, but every summer he returned. Now, he was a different man, hair touched with gray, eyes kind, voice deep and steady. He worked as a grief counselor, helping others rediscover meaning in life. Those who heard him speak often said, "He talks like someone who's died once and been reborn." That day, Benjamin came back to the house carrying a bouquet of forget-me-nots and a thick notebook. He placed the flowers on the small altar where Pauline's photograph still smiled softly. Then he sat down and opened the notebook. Inside were hundreds of letters written by those who had once stayed here. Every letter began the same way. "I have been forgiven, or at least I've begun to learn how to forgive." Benjamin read them one by one, a faint smile on his lips. Each sentence felt like a heartbeat, his mother's heart, still alive through these strangers. Esther entered quietly, her hair now white as snow. She set a pot of tea on the table. "More people come every year," she said, her voice raspy but warm. "Pauline must be smiling somewhere." Benjamin nodded, gazing out at the garden. She always wanted this house to be a place where anyone could return, no matter who they were or what they carried. Now, that wish has come true. He paused, then pulled out a small, yellowed envelope, the first letter he had ever written to himself 10 years ago, the letter to the past. Opening it, he read a few lines and smiled faintly. His voice was soft, almost carried away by the wind. "You once thought forgiveness was weakness, but now you know it's the only strength that saves us." Esther looked at him through tears and smiled. "You're so much like her, Benjamin." He shook his head gently. "No, I'll never be her, but I've learned to love the way she did." Outside, dusk began to fall. The last rays of sunlight streamed through the window, catching the photograph of Pauline. Her eyes seemed to glimmer, alive once more. Benjamin stood, stepped out into the garden, and planted a few new lavender shoots. The breeze moved through the flowers, turning the field a sea of violet. He looked around and whispered, not loudly, but clearly, as if speaking to someone standing right beside him, "Mom, I kept my promise. This house now belongs to those who need hope. And me. I've found peace." A soft wind stirred. The door behind him creaked open, a gentle sound, as though someone had just walked in. Benjamin turned, smiling. "I know you're here, Mom." Night fell. On the hill, the small house glowed with warm light, shining softly through the windows, like Pauline's heart still burning quietly in the dark, illuminating a world where her son had finally learned. Forgiveness is the most enduring form of love,